Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. On today's video, I think we're at the culmination of the Lisa reconstruction project. This has been a really long series that started last year, and I've been slowly getting this Apple Lisa rehabilitated, working again. And I think in this part, it's now time to finally put all these parts back into its chassis, and then of course, reinstall all the plastic cladding that goes on the outside. If you haven't watched any of the previous parts of this series, then this part won't really make sense. So there's a playlist link down below where you can catch up on the entire series, but I'll do a very quick recap. This machine was given to me by a friend of the channel, AJ, and it was in really rough shape. It actually came from Germany originally, but typical battery leakage on this Lisa 2/5 damaged the I/O board and the motherboard, which is the backplane for all of the cards. So in the subsequent installments after that, I proceeded to test all the various components of the board and reconstruct the I/O board and the motherboard and get everything working. Now, it was a long journey because this machine had lots of problems besides just the battery damage, but at this point, everything should actually be working. So what I want to do in this installment is finally reconstruct this jigsaw puzzle of a machine and put all the parts back in here. Hopefully I can remember how to do it since I took this thing apart back in October, and then get this thing up and running and actually play around with it in its final form, the Apple Lisa 2/5. So without further ado, let's get right to it. So here on this table, I have all the parts laid out that go into the Lisa, the CRT, its driver board, that's the various logic circuitry, we have the power supply, wiring harnesses, and finally we have the chassis. Now this computer, when I got it, it was in pretty beat up shape in that I think it had been dropped because the entire case was quite tweaked. Luckily, I'm not sure that's going to be too much of a problem, and that's because the chassis here is all made up of these stamped metal parts that are folded over and then screwed together. So I think because it's screwed together, it should allow me some flexibility of sort of tweaking this and getting it back into shape. Off camera, I actually took apart the chassis completely, and the main reason for doing that was I really needed to clean it. This computer was obviously owned by a smoker and was heavily used, so there was a sort of tar coating on everything. It smelled bad, and every time you touched it, you ended up with a cigarette smell on your fingers. But beyond that, the battery leakage had actually put quite a bit of corrosion down into the chassis area. Now, while this metal is, I don't know what type of metal it is, some kind of like galvanized metal, it seemed to resist the corrosion quite well, but I wanted to fully disassemble it because a lot of the nooks and crannies down in the lower areas where that battery leakage had caused corrosion, I needed to hit it with a wire wheel brush. And luckily, it cleaned up really good. You can definitely see where the corrosion had been, so the case is not in perfect condition, but what do I expect for a Lisa 2/5 where battery corrosion is pretty much guaranteed on all of these. The good thing here is after the cleaning, there's no more cigarette smell. It's much cleaner, there's no grime all over it, so when you touch it, your hands don't end up getting dirty. And finally, while I had it apart, I found that some of the parts were visibly bent and tweaked from whatever trauma this computer had suffered. So I took those parts over to my bench vise, which has an anvil, and I tried to hammer them back into shape just to try to get this thing to, well, not be so tweaked anymore. So I think the fact that I have all the fasteners relatively loose on all these metal pieces, like it's holding together, but everything is loose. That way I can test fit some of the plastic cladding that goes on the outside and make sure everything lines up. And then I can tighten the fasteners down just to kind of hold this thing into place. And hopefully when it goes all back together, I don't have to keep taking it apart and trying to tweak it back into shape to get all the plastic panels to align. Now, speaking of the plastic panels, these are all the panels, and I've already gone ahead and I washed and scrubbed these using magic eraser, so melamine sponge, and a whole lot of elbow grease. They were all absolutely filthy. I mean, grimy, but covered in the cigarette tar. And then there was, of course, 45 years of dirt and dust sitting on the inside parts. And it took quite a bit of work to do, and I did that off camera as well, just because I don't really do restorations on this channel where I'm showing myself like scrubbing and cleaning stuff. So yeah, I just did all that, and this stuff has dried. It's been several days since I did that, and things look pretty good. Like, this is the exposed part that you would see when it's mounted on the computer down where the power switch and the keyboard jack is, and looks great. Now I did find a few areas on the case where there was a tiny bit of damage, and this was one of them. This fastener actually was broken off. The threaded part was stuck in the chassis and the screw head was still stuck in this little boss here. And I haven't actually tried to glue this together, but it's still pretty strong. I think it should be fine once I have a new fastener in there. This was the only place on the entire plastic cladding that was totally broken or cracked like this, although there are little dings and dents all around the case, because obviously this thing has had a rough life and it's really heavy, so it got kind of tossed around, I think. So let's take a look at these other plastic pieces. So this was the back cover. Now this still has a little bit of glue residue on the back and plus some scratches and scuffs. I didn't really scrub this too hard using magic eraser because it's unfortunately textured plastic, and when you try to rub it really hard with magic eraser, it ends up making shiny spots. I did try to attack this glue residue using a little solvent. I used WD-40, let it soak, but that has been on there probably for 40 years, maybe an original sticker from wherever this thing was, like if it was a school or something. So that is still visible. Plus there are little scrapes and scuffs. I figure once this computer is back together, it'll be easier to try to clean up these scrapes and scuffs, but overall condition is quite good. Now one area where there is a bit of corrosion here is down in this lower corner, although I attacked it with the Dremel just to try to polish it off. It doesn't look perfect, but I had to be careful to try not to eat away or hit this plastic piece here since I couldn't take this apart. But I'm happy with the way this turned out, and it doesn't look nearly as bad as it did before I actually attacked it with the bristle brush. This plastic piece goes on the very base of the computer, and it's in pretty good shape. There's a little bit of glue residue and some other scuff marks here, and I did try to clean those, but it's actually kind of making a shiny spot. So I just stopped because it looks pretty good. And again, this was really filthy, especially on the inside part where the dirt had been settling for 40 years. And now at least it's okay to touch. Here is the front faceplate of the machine, and it looks pretty good. Definitely has some yellowing on it. We have some scuff marks here and here. One of the dangers, again, with something like this is if I try to attack these scuff marks, it can end up removing some of the yellowing on the plastic, and you can end up with lighter spots that can be potentially more unsightly than just the scuff marks that are on here, which aren't too bad. Unfortunately, when we compare the front and you look at the yellowing to the backside, this is the color that it should be. This definitely has suffered some UV related yellowing or whatever causes the plasticking to yellow. I don't think this is just cigarette tar. There was a lot of that came off on the sponge. It made the sponge kind of a yellow color, but I think, yeah, we're down to actual yellowing of the plastic now. And giving this thing a sniff, doesn't really have any cigarette smell, so that's good. Next up is the top cover, and here's where I decided to do something that I think might be a little bit controversial. I decided to leave this tape on here that says opened and resealed by German Customs. I feel that this tape tells a story about this machine. And the thing about this computer is I don't really know anything about its history. I don't know if it originated in Germany, meaning it was sold there originally and used in Germany, or maybe it made its way to Germany and then came back to the United States and ended up getting, well, inspected by German Customs for some reason. And in part one, I discussed some of the mysteries about this machine. Like it had no power supply, a bunch of the fasteners that hold the plastic cladding on were missing. Where did that come from? Did that happen from a previous owner, or did that happen when Customs looked at the machine? Did they take it apart and like lost some of those parts? I have questions, and I don't think I'm ever gonna have answers. So I decided to leave this tape on here, and it's just on the top cover, and there was some extra tape that kind of folded around to the inside, and I cut that off. I mean, there's a little bit right there, but I feel like that just tells a story, and I'm gonna leave that on there. I think that's just kind of cool. If you have any ideas about what would be a good method for removing these scuff marks without taking away the yellowing that's in the plastic, please let me know. I typically use baking soda on stuff like this if the plastic's not yellowed, and it does a really good job at like kind of preserving the texture, but helping get rid of the scuff mark that's sort of trapped in the little nooks and crannies of the textured plastic. But I'm just afraid of working too hard on this, where I end up making these like light color spots on the yellow plastic. And then the last two pieces are the two side covers. Now this side cover has also sticker residue on it, and there's a lighter spot where there was a sticker. Someone peeled that off and it left behind a lot of the glue. Again, I tried to use a solvent like WD-40. I soaked this and then tried to get this off, and it just was not budging. I'm thinking for this type of glue stuff, you might need to apply some heat, and those clothing or upholstery steamers that car detailers use might actually go a long way to getting this off. But I don't have one, and I don't know anyone has one in town here. So for now, I just cleaned this as best I could, and I just left it. There's a big dent in the plastic there and a big kind of scratch up in the top here. It looks like a scuff, but that's actually a scratch in the plastic. There's another scratch down there. So this side of the machine is a little rough, but at least it's not grimy and it's pretty clean now, and none of the standoffs are broken. So this thing is gonna go back on and get affixed to the chassis without any issues. And I guess this is just some of the wear of the fact that this machine has had a very hard life. And our last part is the other side, and this side actually is pretty nice. It's a bit of yellowing over here in the front section. It might be hard to see on camera. We have a little scratch in the case there, a scuff there. Overall, this side looks pretty perfect. It's a bit of a light spot there. All the standoffs are good, and it's nice and clean. So I think at this point, it's now just gonna be a montage of me trying to figure out the correct order of operations for getting this thing back together. I think first things first is the analog driver board for the CRT and the flyback has to go in. That kind of goes down here into this area. Then there are the two harnesses, the analog harness and there's a digital harness that have to go in. Some of the fasteners for those harnesses are going to be missing, so I'm going to have to come up with some kind of a solution because a bunch of them suffered catastrophic corrosion when I originally took this machine apart down here in this area on the backside. This was all corroded very badly by the battery leakage. You can just sort of see the residue of that. But so I have to figure out how to get those all mounted and routed. And then I think at that point I can probably start to try to tighten all the fasteners that hold this chassis together. And then I'll come back and decide what the next step is, which is probably starting to put on some of the plastic paneling. Probably the bottom ones go on first. I took a look at the construction of this machine and I realized that a bunch of the fasteners that hold all these metal pieces together that form the chassis, they're inaccessible when you start installing parts. So I decided to start tightening down all the fasteners to get it to stop wobbling. I found a few that I hadn't installed, so I got those installed as well. So the first step in reassembling Lisa is to get the flyback transformer mounted. There are two fasteners on the bottom of the machine. Next up, I install the analog harness. This is what brings power to all the various components and also video signals and sound, stuff like that. These connectors are held into the chassis using nuts and bolts, and many of them were completely damaged and destroyed from the battery corrosion. So I had to go into my box of parts and find suitable replacements that would fit. It was a little bit tricky because there's some clearancing issues, but I did get it figured out. The other thing you have to consider is that these connectors have a bit of wiggle room when you get them into the chassis, but they need to be aligned properly with the various components that plug into them. The power supply and the motherboard tray, and also the bottom connector on the CRT driver board is actually holding the CRT driver board into place. That's two fasteners at the top, and then the connector itself holds it in on the bottom. There's probably a very specific order of operations for getting these fasteners installed, possibly even when the chassis is partially disassembled, you kind of get things into place. Because some of them are a little hard to tighten because you have to get your hands in there to hold the nut and get the screwdrivers in place. Before I fully tightened down the connector for the analog signals that go to the main motherboard tray, I did a test fit where I loosened them, slid it into place, made sure I had a nice solid connection, and I tried to tighten the fasteners on the back side while the motherboard tray was in place, just so I could make sure the alignment of that edge connector was as good as possible. Next up, time for the digital harness. This was the harness I completely rebuilt from scratch, although I reused the connector that goes onto the motherboard tray because that was a little bit of a bespoke part, but the ribbon cable itself and the end connectors I got from stock. The reason why I had to rebuild this is because it was completely damaged by the battery leakage. And just like with the analog connector on the motherboard tray, I decided to test fit it just to make sure it was aligned properly. And it was good I did that because I needed to tweak it a little bit, and then I tightened down those fasteners. Next up is the power button and the keyboard connector. This little module actually connects to the digital harness, which is why I'm installing it now. And it was really tight and difficult to get those fasteners in. There's just not a lot of space. This might have been one of the items that you install before you actually put the entire chassis together. I'm sliding the floppy drive into place. This connects up to the digital harness as well. Nothing much to it. This just kind of goes in and screws in and plug in the harness the correct way. Next up, I'm test fitting the power supply. I wanted to make sure that the analog harness that plugs into it was properly aligned. But I realized when I did that it actually didn't go in all the way. It seemed like it wasn't making contact with the harness. Unfortunately, you can't see inside the box that the chassis makes around the power supply, so I couldn't really see what was binding up. It turned out that the chassis itself was tweaked and it was catching on the edge of the power supply, so you couldn't push it in the last couple centimeters. So I used some vice grips to just sort of nudge or slightly bend the chassis just to clear the power supply sliding in, and that fixed it. Next up is to get the CRT installed. The driver board's already there along with the flyback, so I'm test fitting the CRT. Well, I ran into a little bit of a problem with the CRT going into place. It goes in without issue. We have to be careful not to damage the back neck connector. But it turns out getting the CRT in there is pretty tricky. There's just not a lot of space behind it to connect the connector that goes onto the neck of the CRT and to plug in the deflection yoke. Turned out that the Lisa has a little box that's behind the CRT that kind of shields the motherboard area from the back of the CRT. You got to remove that to easily connect the CRT up. So once I had that out, I was able to get the connector on and get those wires connected up. Getting the CRT in is pretty much the trickiest process. The whole machine's kind of unstable, it wants to tilt forward, but once I got it in, no problems, and I had to get that little box reinstalled on the backside once I had all the connectors connected. And we're nearly there. Getting the motherboard back into place actually makes the computer a whole lot stable, just adds the weight on the backside. And the Lisa is ready for testing. Now, since you last saw it just a second ago, I actually ended up putting on this front plastic piece along with the bottom piece. And that's because without this on, the machine's quite front heavy, just with the glass of the CRT, and it wants to tilt forward. This plastic piece with these feet obviously is there to help this not tilt forward, and it's nice and stable now with this in place. I have this keyboard plugged in through the keyboard adapter, mouse is connected, and power is plugged into the back. I have not tried to turn this on yet. This will be the very first test with it fully reassembled into the case, and I have no idea if it's going to work or it's going to smoke or what's going to happen. So I'm going to turn on the power strip that supplies power to the power supply, and it is on. And here we go, 3, 2, 1. The light's on, that's cool. It's the first time I've seen that LED power light inside the actual machine. Let's see if it works. So far, no smoke. And this CRT does take a long time to wake up. Okay, we got a rolling image, but I think I bumped some of those controls when I installed it. So let's see, vertical hold control. There it is, it looks way too bright. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the contrast down so I can adjust the brightness control or the screen control. I want to eliminate those retrace lines. So if I turn this up, you can see the retrace lines. Just turn it down just so we don't see those, just like that. And now I'll adjust the contrast control. Oh, actually those lines become visible again. So we'll turn it down a little bit more, just so they're not visible. Turn that up so it looks good, and yep, that looks quite good. I am amazed seeing this Lisa all back together. Wow, just wow. Okay, so we have a working speaker. I don't know if the floppy drive works yet. Let's see if we can go into service mode. That does work. Some of the discs I have here do work. Lisa Test Disk 1 and 2. So let's try Lisa Test Disk 1. Interesting is I can see a red LED on inside the disk drive, which I assume is one of the sensors for like write protect or something like that. Now, incidentally, I figured out in a previous installment that Lisa Test does not boot if I only have one of the memory cards in place. It almost expects this machine, maybe because it's a Lisa 2/10, that's the main I/O board, to actually have 1 meg of RAM installed, because I think that's how that computer came from Apple. So with both RAM cards installed, this Lisa Test diagnostic does actually work. That really threw me for a loop because everything I read didn't really indicate that that was the case. But with this machine, absolutely it is the case. So I can't believe it. The machine, it's booting. I mean, it's working here. It looks good. Yeah, Lisa Test XL looks nice and sharp. I mean, I could really see the burn-in on the screen. There's sort of a dark spot right here from whatever was displayed all the time on here, but it looks remarkably sharp, remarkably good, and fully usable. I fully expect once I get the front cover installed that I will have to adjust the geometry of the CRT because I have a feeling quite a bit of the CRT is obscured by the plastic bezel. Now, I saw some comments from people suggesting that maybe that wiggle problem with the vertical lines would not happen once everything was installed into the chassis. We can test that really easily by simply moving the horizontal phase control so it shifts the picture over to the left, and we can see if those dots come back. And I'm just trying to get the camera to focus properly, but without a doubt, the dot wiggle, whatever we want to call it, is still fully there. It's just as bad as it was before. And that's with the phase control shifted over to the left. And if I move it all the way over to the right, which is where I had it, that wiggle goes away entirely. So no change having everything remounted in the chassis. All right, well, with a machine like this, all that's really left for me to do is do another montage where I get all the side panels on. This is where I'm a little bit worried because I'm still worried that this entire chassis is still tweaked from when this machine was dropped, and trying to get those covers on may prove kind of problematic. I did a little bit of test fitting when I was reassembling the parts inside, and I think I have it kind of bent into a shape that should work. And I utilize the fact that the CRT has 4 bolts around the edges that allows me to tweak the whole front of the computer, and then I can just tighten those down while it's in the correct tweaked position. And right now, the way I have it bent is this front bar is over to the left while the bottom is over to the right. So I kind of turned it all this way, tightened down those screws. I think that might do the trick, but we'll see when I try to get this thing back together. So on to the high-speed montage. Just like with the chassis, there's probably an order of operations that you should be following when you put this thing together, but I don't know them, so I'm just putting the side covers on first. Now the side cover that's on the left side of the machine actually has an extra fastener at the bottom that's impossible to get to, and when I was taking them off, it was very difficult. So I'm leaving that fastener off. That way, if I ever take this thing apart in the future, I don't have to struggle with it. There's definitely some evidence of the case being tweaked because these need to be kind of pushed and shoved a little bit to be able to be screwed on properly. I'm definitely most worried about the top cover. When this machine was given to me, there was no way the top cover ever would have been able to be fastened on just because the case was so bent up. But I was quite relieved to find that while I could tell the case was still messed up a little bit, it was possible to actually fasten the top cover on properly. Now I'm working on the back cover. Unfortunately, one of the fasteners is completely broken off on it, so I'm going to have to get creative on how to attach it. And I ended up kind of putting it on, taking it off, having to kind of take the top cover off again, because I had to come up with some kind of creative solution to keep it attached. It's obvious from the fastener that's left on this that whoever's trying to open this thing really didn't know what they were doing, and they caused pretty substantial damage to the back cover. And while my creative solution isn't perfect, it's certainly going to work. And it's back together. It's back to freaking together. The case is a little bit tweaked. There's a bit of a gap there. I think there's a little bit of a gap over there, and that's just because the whole thing is sort of twisted. But it is together, and that is better than it was when I got this thing. It was filthy, and half the covers were not connected and loose, and especially the top cover didn't even close at all. It was completely misaligned. Looking at the backside, things look pretty good as well. Of course, I'm missing the fastener on this side, and this one over here is actually broken. It should be attached to the beige plastic, but it is broken off. Obviously, when someone tried to get into this thing, I'm assuming it was the German customs, they broke that fastener, but at least it's still there and it does work. It's holding the case closed, but this one is just missing altogether. So I used a little piece of wire, solid core wire, and I just wrapped it around through the vent hole there. Without that holding it on, the whole back cover is kind of like spring-loaded, and this whole side pops away by a good amount. So this is decent. This works, and the back cover is on. The interlock switch for the power supply, which this cover pushes on, I think should be working. The other interlock switch, which is on the front cover, I bypassed. It is no longer in play anymore, so you can run the Lisa with the front cover removed. And I just can't believe, looking at this machine, this 43-year-old computer that has been treated who knows how badly, shipped around the world. It's absolutely stunning how it looks now. Why don't we turn this thing on and see if it still works? And I want to see that alignment of the CRT as well. It's funny how long it takes for the CRT to wake up, but there it is. Ah, okay, I do need to adjust it. Height is a little too tall. And the annoying thing about having to adjust the height is I have to take the back cover off, which has that little twist tie, and then I have to take the top cover off, which has 2 fasteners. And when you do that, the front cover won't stay on anymore because the top part is held on by the top cover. Before I take this thing apart again, just to fix the CRT geometry, I wanted to show you a little party trick that the Lisa has, and at least has when you boot this Lisa test disk. This is booted up into Lisa test. It just wants me to do the diagnostic, but say I don't want to, and I just want to push the power button to turn the computer off. Watch this. The CRT dims. That is quite the party trick. And there they go. The computer just turned on. We had that little blip on the screen. How freaking cool is that? The fact that this thing has soft power on off is quite cool. But the fact that it can dim the screen out like that is also cool. I think it has a screensaver function that can also do that, which is kind of curious because this has such bad burn-in, but I think the burn-in came from when it was running the Macintosh OS, which I guess it doesn't have any ability to dim the screen. Now, one thing I noticed is I just brought the height down, so that looks a bit more correct. I could increase the width a little bit. It seems like the borders on the side are a little bigger than they probably need to be. Problem is the width control, which is that coil that I fixed, is kind of inaccessible when this thing is all mounted in the chassis. Kind of annoying. I might have to take one of my little adjustment tools and trim it down because I only really need like this much of it. And then I think I can get it in there, but definitely this full length, it's not going to work. All right, well, that's about as good as I can get it. I did actually cut down the little adjustment tool. I had like several that would work, so I cut this one down. and I could get it in there and I was turning it, but it was just really difficult. I just can't get my hand in there. But it's definitely quite a bit wider than it was. I centered the image a little bit with the centering rings. It's a little twisted, but I don't really care. This never would have been perfect even back in the day, and there's no point trying to get CRTs looking perfect. It just looks a bit better than it did, and for that, I'm happy. While I have the top cover open though, I am gonna bring up the test pattern, and I'm just gonna adjust the vertical linearity. You want the boxes on the top and the bottom to be the same. These look a little more squished than the ones on the top. Here's the linearity control. So I turn it one way, now it's small at the top, bigger at the bottom, and vice versa. You just want to try to even it out as best as possible. Again, it's not possible to get it perfect. It's totally fine. I think I'm happy with the way that looks right there. Yeah, good enough for me. And then from a contrast control, I know it's hard to see on camera because it auto gains and all that stuff. But I just want to get this, it's pretty bright there, but we're in a dark room right now, so I should turn on the lights down here. This is a better representation of how it looked with some ambient light in the room. And turning up the contrast too much, if I do that, it gets brighter, but then it starts to bleed and become less focused. So it's a compromise where you want to get that adjusted where, it's still relatively sharp, but still completely readable in a decently bright room. And I'm thinking that looks okay. I'm also thinking that when I'm booted into LOS, I can turn down the contrast a little bit since there is software control of that, which would eliminate a little bit of that blurriness. So the Lisa's back together again, and we have the profile hard drive sitting on top, which is a pretty common configuration of how people used to run these. I am having a small issue with the power supply on the Lisa. It doesn't affect the actual way the computer works, but what it does is when I plug it in, occasionally it trips my breaker. I have a GFCI or an RCD breaker, which is able to detect if there's any leakage between the earth on the computer, the connector on the back, and the live. On most power supplies, it is the Y-class capacitor that's connected between the earth and the live. It's a noise suppression thing. It's possible on this it's not using a Y-class capacitor, and the ones that are on there have gotten a little bit leaky. So occasionally it will trip the breaker when I first turn it on. So let's see what happens if I do that now. I'm going to flip the power switch on the power strip that's powering up both of these. Okay, it didn't trip anything. So that time it worked fine. So first I'm going to turn on the profile. This thing has to boot up and it's going to take its sweet time to spin up, and we need to get that ready light to be solid. I'm also noticing that this profile hard drive is a little bit wobbly sitting on the top here. It's a little unstable, even though it's got 5 feet on the bottom. It's quite possible that this is the computer itself that's tweaked, like the top cover is not completely flat, but this profile hard drive is also missing some parts, like some metal plates and brackets and things like that. So it's quite possible that the profile drive itself is what is causing the wobble. And incidentally, this 5 megabyte profile hard drive was not designed to work with the Apple Lisa. This was actually for the Apple III, and it's the same form factor as the Apple III, so it can sit on top of the Apple III below the monitor. Apple decided to reuse the profile hard drive on the original Lisa, and then the Lisa 2/5, which is what this one was. And then as I've talked about before, the 2/10 had an internal hard drive that Apple designed. They designed every part of it and manufactured it. It was called the widget drive. And I could tell this faceplate, even though this was the original one from the 5 or 2/5 machine, it has a little spot for a LED indicator right there. So this obviously was the same faceplate on both machines. So the ready light is off. I thought it was on solid when the drive was ready, but I guess not. So I'm just going to turn on the computer. And the ready light came on. So maybe the ready light doesn't come on if it's plugged into the computer and the computer is turned off. So I've seen this machine boot off of this profile hard drive before in a previous installment. So I know this scenario works unless something broke on the computer. Okay, no, it does not work. It is not detecting it. This could easily be the cable that I'm using though. I just grabbed a random 25-pin cable and it might be missing some of the signals. So let me turn everything off and try that again. Oh, you know what I just did? I accidentally plugged the profile hard drive into the serial port, and that could have easily just damaged the profile hard drive. Oh boy, that sucks. Now normally that wouldn't have been possible, but the reason why it was is because I replaced the 25-pin connector for the serial port, well, for all the ports, and the original one had one of the pins blanked out, so if you just tried to plug a normal 25-pin cable into it, it wouldn't actually fit. But I just plugged it in, and yeah, this thing might not be working anymore. The drive is spinning, so that's probably fine, but I might have damaged some stuff on the controller. I suppose if this profile didn't survive, I guess I'm gonna have to try to repair it and see if I can get that working. but I have to be very careful about plugging this into the wrong port. It's because on the back of the machine, I couldn't really see the ports. Okay, good. It's working. Whew. It survived. I feel lucky. I would hope that the input port on this has some buffer transceiver type chips that I could have replaced to try to revive it and get it working again, but luckily it survived. Ooh, that's a relief. Yeah, there we go. It's booting the OS. So as I was saying, I had used this thing previously. I imaged this off of one of the images that are on the ESProfile emulator because it has the ability to write an image onto this. There's a link in the description to that video if you haven't watched it yet. It was a second channel video. Clock calendar not set. Yes, of course. We know that. Okay, first thing I want to do is I have opened up the preferences. Let's take a look at the screen contrast. Okay, yes, absolutely software controllable, and it just seems to kind of be in the middle. I probably should have not made it so bright, but I suppose this is fine because I can just turn it down to not overdrive the CRT. It looks like you can make it that dim, and I can make it way brighter. Oh yeah, way too bright, but that's fine. So we'll just make it dimmer. Looks like minutes until screen dims, 1 to 2, all the way to 30 to 60. And then you can control the dim level, and actually we'll show it to you very briefly. That's pretty cool. Speaker volume, and remember I changed out the speaker. The speaker that's in here is from an old television set, if I recall. It's pretty loud. Okay, what else do we have? Startup. Startup from internal disk, diskette, brief, or thorough memory test. Oh, I didn't even know I could do a thorough memory test with the built-in diagnostics. That's kind of cool. Device connection, serial port A and B, nothing connected. Yes, I know. Now what I'm curious about are these settings saved to the hard drive, and then when I boot the OS, it loads them? Because there's no battery in this machine, so there's no non-volatile RAM. And the Lisa 2/10 didn't ever have a battery from the factory, only the 2.5 and the original Lisa. And I just noticed it says startup from internal disk. So this actually really understands that it is a 2/10 because the IO board itself is from a 210, even though the rest of the components on this machine are from a 2.5. Now, as far as I'm aware, to set the clock, I think we have to do that with the clock app. It wasn't in the preferences. And one thing I hope you're getting a feeling for, just me poking around here, is how slow the Lisa is. This was really early on with the graphical user interface, but when I click on a window, you'll see how slowly it draws. It's usable, but compared to our new modern conventions, it's pretty frustratingly slow. So can I type in a date? I'll just put, 87. I don't know, put something random in. I'm assuming that it will be able to save the time if we rebooted the computer, or maybe I have to say save and put away. Okay, so what I'm curious about, I can double click this stuff. If I push the power button now, are we gonna get that nice soft dim that we saw when we were running Lisa test? Let's see. Really curious about this. Lisa is turning off. Of course, I did this power down sequence before, but I didn't have a CRT hooked up. I was just hooked up to the RGB2HDMI. Yes, it does. That is super cool. I absolutely love that. Okay, let's boot the computer back up again. So CRT hadn't really cooled off yet. The heater just takes a long time to wake up. But if we turned it back on, it kind of came back very quickly there, as you saw. The computer was off, though. It's definitely off. So this is where theoretically we could set, oh, well, no, I turned it off and on. So probably lost the clock settings, the memory test setting. I don't think I even changed the memory test setting. We would have had to do the restart option for it to actually retain those settings, like to do a thorough memory test at boot there. So I mentioned this when I powered this thing up last time. I sort of played around a little bit. The paradigm of this entire OS, or office system as it calls, is really to emulate the way an office is. So it has this whole concept of tearing off paper from a stationery pad, and you can write on it, and then you can put it away, which is kind of like the same thing as like sliding off to the side. You could save it. We have the usual cut, copy, paste, and it is Control X, C, and V. The window controls are kind of normal. We can resize the window. You can see how slow the graphics update is. Obviously, we can move this to scroll, but there's nothing to scroll because that's all the icons we have. It says 5157 blocks free out of 9690. Backed up never, format 15, release 2.0. Okay, so that's telling us that the OS we're running is 2.0. So there was something called empty folders. and I double clicked on it, and now we have another folder called Untitled. Can I rename this? Yes, I can. Adrian. And if I want another folder, I guess I double click on this, and that gave us another empty folder. It's like grabbing an empty folder from a stack of folders, and then you can name it, by writing on the edge of it what it is. So like Lisa. Now under the housekeeping menu, we have some interesting options here. Alphabetical view, chronological view, straighten up icons, repair and erase the profile hard drive, and empty the wastebasket. So it looks like there's a list view. Look at that. So all the dates on here are 1980. There's a 1987 date there. Is that for the folder I just made? Yes, it is. So it did retain the clock calendar. We also have chronological view. So that just sorts it by the created date, I suppose. Pictorial view. And then we have straighten up icons. Yep, that just aligns them to a grid. We can undo the last change, which is what? Lisa cannot undo the last operation. Okay. We can set aside profile, which I think is the equivalent of like taking this open folder and setting it aside. So it essentially just closes it. We can double click it, and we can also double click on this icon, and that seems to have the same function as set aside. Now, if I click on Lisa Calc Paper, I'm quite sure this is the equivalent, even though it's a program, of a stack of papers. So I click here and I can say tear off stationery, which I think is the same thing as if I just double click on it. It will make a new file. Yeah, it's making a new document for Lisa Calc on the profile hard drive. So there's our untitled spreadsheet. And let me double click on it. I think it's going to do the same thing. Yes, it's going to do exactly the same thing. So there's our second spreadsheet. Now, if I click on one of these spreadsheets, I don't think there's any kind of like get info. No, there's not. It's select all, housekeeping. We'd have to look at the alphabetical view if we want to see when that file was created, which was 6:12 p.m. So now if we double click on sheet 1, that actually opens the application, the Lisa Calc, and it allows us to use this spreadsheet. You don't double click on the actual Lisa Calc app to open it. It always tears off a new document first. Now that took quite a while to open. I will have cut some of that down for the video. I'm noticing the CRT is not working great. So anytime there are horizontal lines, it causes deflection issues. So any horizontal line here, I have little blips. I don't know if that's going to come across in the camera. I think this is mainly happening because I'm overdriving the CRT driver board in this to really make this picture bright on this old CRT. If I turn down the brightness, I bet that problem goes away. Okay, well, turning down the brightness on the back, that's just the screen control. That does not have any effect at all on that little problem. But I'm going to open up the preferences and I'll turn down the cathode drive by turning down the screen brightness in there. And maybe that will minimize this problem. It's hard to say, actually. It does minimize it. It's really visible there, but I turn it down, it's less. It's still there though. I still see it. It's definitely minimized. It could be that we just have some tired caps on the CRT driver board, but the thing is, the issue only shows up on the right side of the image. There's no issues at all on the left side of the image. Anytime you see issues like that, we know it's not the same problem we have with the wiggles, because the wiggling pixels, that was happening the entire width of the screen. That was the phase control. This is happening essentially only on this side of the image. Over here, everything looks perfect. Anyhow, back to our spreadsheet. Everything is like super duper slow motion. I don't have arrow keys on this keyboard, so I don't have any way to move the box around. I'm sure I could if I had arrow keys. And I'm assuming if I select these, we can probably do some kind of a sum. Calculate automatically, yep, calculate manually. That was normal that on slow computers like this, you had a complex spreadsheet. Every time it was recalculating, if you had a bunch of formulas, it would be kind of slow. So you could turn it to manually, and then you could pick now to manually do the actual calculations. You can protect. We can do different types of formatting, like currency. Justification on this machine is called flush, left flush, right flush. Looks like you can adjust the width of the columns, just like as you would expect. It's shall we say, slow. Looks like with the copy and paste, we have nice stuff like paste adjusting, paste values. So if you don't want to paste the formatting, I guess you can do that. And then we have the file print menu, so we can set aside the document, which just setting it aside minimizes it. If you want to put it away, you have to save and put away, which closes it. You can save and continue, which saves without closing it, but putting set aside only minimizes the document. So we say set aside everything. I think it's gonna minimize this document down to the bottom, but it's not necessarily saved. It's just minimized. And we can double click it here to bring it back. And there's what we were working on. And of course you can run multiple apps at the same time on this machine. It is, multitasking in that sense of the word. Now, last time I was playing around with Lisa, I was wondering if you could close a document without saving it. Apparently you cannot. You could minimize it, but it's not closed. It's still open. But say you want to close it without saving your changes, you can't do that. I'm assuming that's what this revert to a previous version is. So let's try that. I'm going to put 456 there. And I'm going to save and continue. And 789 is what I'm going to change it to. And I'm going to go, oh no, we need that back, what we had there before. So I'll revert to previous version. I guess there's version control. Oh yeah, we have another copy of it that was saved 12 seconds ago. Do we want to revert? And we hit OK. Now it's reverted. It should be 456 in that box. It is. But here's where I'm curious. I'm going to put 890. I'm going to say save and put away. And I want to see if we can load this back up and revert back to a previous version. It's not even down here anymore because it wasn't minimized. It was put away. So it should be just back on the hard drive. It was sheet 1 we were working on. Okay, so there's the 890. Now let's try previous version. Sheet 1 has not been changed since it was last put away. So any version control you have is not something that's saved on the hard drive. It's sort of an ephemeral, temporary thing that allows you to revert back to the version you have while you have it open. But that's frustrating because if we change this document, say by deleting a bunch of stuff, well, I guess we have to clear entries. I pushed the backspace key, that didn't do anything. And I'm like, oh no, I want that stuff back. Well, obviously we can undo, but say we did something like that. And then I'm like, oh no, all we can do is undo last change. And let's see, that should, well, it can't even undo that. Okay, well, I want that table back. I guess we could revert. Let's see what that does. That brought back the tables and stuff. So I guess that's what you got to do. Is if you don't want to make the changes, you have to open the document, say you work on it, you're like, oops, I don't want to save. You have to revert to previous version, then you have to pick save and put away just to kind of end your session, so to speak. Like this, it's going to save it and it's going to close Lisa Calc. Incidentally, in the tools directory here, there's calculator and the clock. And I'm pretty sure these can just stay running all the time as well. These are like desk accessories on Macintosh OS. I think the paradigm is very similar, although these are just normal Lisa apps. And since the Lisa is multitasking in that it can run multiple apps at the same time, the calculator cannot remember how you had customized it. It'll be customized as a 4-function calculator. Okay. So we have customization, reverse Polish, adding machine, 4-function, show tape, hide tape. So we can do reverse Polish. Let's give that a try. Enter another value, and then we hit plus, and there we go. There's the addition, and there's our tape. So we can leave this running while we do other stuff. So let's open up the clock. Wow, the computer is so slow. And apparently, if you have a 1 meg or a 512K Lisa, it's much worse because it has some kind of swapping anything that happens, memory management that's happening. There's some memory management hardware in this Lisa, which allows it to run Unix. But that just, yeah, this is slow. Okay, let's close tools. Just a lot of waiting. Let's open up the word processor, Lisa write. Well, it's going to create a document by tearing off a page. While it's doing that, I wonder if this would change the clock there. So let's open up Lisa write. Just a moment, please. So I can't click on anything while it's loading. Oh, maybe I can. No, I can't. That doesn't do anything. I'm trying to bring the calculator up. Oh, there we go. It did bring the calculator up even while it was loading Lisa page in the back, or Lisa write, I think it was called. Uh-oh, I lost the mouse pointer. Oh, came back. I thought we might have had a crash there. So I'm going to play around with this a little bit more. I'm going to shut down the computer because I'm going to move it onto the bench and I'm going to get this hooked up to the capture setup so that you can see a captured version of this as opposed to me just recording the screen. And I'm going to play around with this a little bit more and just sort of get a feel for the way Lisa OS works. And I want to see this fade out. I really like the fade out. There it is. Boy, that looks cool. Well, I moved the computer onto the bench and I took the cover off again because, yeah, there's still a few issues happening with this CRT driver board. One of the things I noticed is the width issue that I was having where I had to try to adjust that coil. Well, that really came down to the fact that the potentiometer for width had been bumped. And remember, width on these potentiometers, that adjusts the B+ voltage. So I actually adjusted it back to where I think it should be, and then I put a little bit of hot glue on these 4 potentiometers. The 2 that I didn't glue are the phase and the contrast control. I was playing around with some of the OS images that are on the emulator, and I figured out something that was kind of interesting, actually. Also, I don't think this comes across in the camera, but I noticed the burn-in that's on this screen is Mac Paint. 100% this is Mac Paint. I can see all of the different patterns and textures there, the different line thicknesses, and then we have the actual drawing window, and it only takes up this much space because the resolution of this screen has a higher horizontal width than a regular Macintosh, and then the toolbar is right there. So it's pretty hilarious to me that whoever was using this machine before used Mac Paint so much or just left it running all the time that it burned in the screen. Now right off the bat, something odd is happening with this version of LOS that I just loaded. The brightness control for the CRT doesn't seem to work, which is odd because I was using it just a little while ago and it was working just fine. Let's see, yeah, even the screensaver one is not working. So I'm just going to turn up the brightness using the potentiometer because I wanted to demonstrate something I figured out with the issues with this weird line problem happening over on the left side. So I'd like you to pay attention to this gradient pattern that's in the scroll bar. And you can see that there's these lines that are happening there, and that's this problem happening. And it seems to be exacerbated by the fact that we have these horizontal lines in the spreadsheet that's right behind it. And you can see even in this black box, you see little marks on the side, and that's also coming from those lines. Now the problems don't really persist over on the far right side of the screen, but they're definitely happening on the left side there. And yeah, anytime you have a spreadsheet open, it really seems to exacerbate the problem. Now here's something that's really interesting. If I adjust the horizontal phase over to the right, which is going to bring back those wiggles, those lines go away. Watch this. See? Gone. Now we have the wiggles, but the lines, at least in this part of the gradient, aren't there. Although down here, you can still just see that there is an issue. But if I keep going over, let's see if I can get it to go away entirely. No, I guess not. So something weird is happening with the CRT driver board. And I think my fix for the wiggly lines seems to exacerbate the problem because the issue with the spreadsheets causing those lines over on the right side, they only really happen if I have the image all the way over to one side. So now the wiggles are gone, but those lines are back. So it really makes me feel like there's still an issue with the driver board. And the fix I applied to add those little capacitors so I could move the image back centered, well, it seems to cause this particular issue. I haven't really figured out what's causing the wiggles to happen, and I also haven't figured out what's causing this weird line offset thing to happen over on the right side. Although I did notice that it can happen anywhere on the screen. Like I see it over here through the preferences bar, and if I do drop-down menus, I can see it there as well, but it's worse over on the side. So it seems to happen all over the screen. But when I move the phase, so it's kind of moved back over there, then those problems don't really happen. I mean, it's still happening right here for some reason, but it's not happening anywhere in this area. And one thing I can tell is if I turn the contrast control way, way down, I know you can probably barely see it. I still see the wiggles, those are still happening. If I move the phase all the way over to the right side, let's make this a bit brighter so I can see it. It seems that all of these symptoms go away when I turn the cathode drive down. Like at this level, there are no more artifacts. The image looks perfect. So my hypothesis as to what's happening is since the CRT is weak, I really have to push the cathode drive really hard to get a bright image, which of course is like this. And I think on most Lisas, probably when you have it set to something like this, you would get a nice usable image if the CRT wasn't worn out, and then you wouldn't have any of those visual artifacts. We'd still be having the wiggle, because if I move this back into the position where the wiggles are happening, yeah, I completely can still see the wobbling happening. But over here, where I have it centered now, because of those caps I added, no more visual artifacts. But of course, I have to turn up the cathode drive to get a good image because the CRT is so worn out, and that's where we're seeing issues. So I think I'm running up against power supply limits inside the CRT driver itself, and it's causing these visual artifacts. I'm assuming what's happening, because these artifacts are mostly over here and not there, this is some kind of a deflection issue, but it's like on a per scan line basis. And these types of issues are notoriously hard to troubleshoot, and I don't think just blanket recapping that board is going to necessarily fix this. This could be another component that's drifted because there's a bunch of carbon composite resistors on there. This could also be the power supply on the Lisa itself, because remember, the CRT board runs off a dedicated power supply for like the 33 volts or whatever it is, but also the deflection is also running off the 12 volt from the power supply. So it takes two rails from the power supply, and either one of those could be acting up, causing these issues. I've also noticed a problem that if I put the disk in here, when it's accessing, the image shifts around a little bit. Now that makes more sense because this runs off 12 volts, the disk drive, and of course we know that the phase control is derived from that 12 volt rail, along with a cathode drive. But the cathode drive, which will make the image dimmer or brighter, that doesn't seem to be affected by the floppy drive being accessed. But without a doubt, when this thing is accessing, I do notice the whole image shifting around a little bit. So that all goes back to that Zener diode power supply for the phase control. It takes the 12 volt, brings it to 5 volt, might be the problem. And maybe I need to replace that with, say, a 7805 voltage regulator and just do away with that whole Zener diode circuit. And maybe that'll stabilize both the wiggles and it will fix this shifting around problem from that 12 volt rail from the disk drive. And I'm ejecting the disk right now. Let's see here. Yeah, I can see it wobbling. You probably won't be able to see it on the camera, but it's visible to me. So really what this is telling me is I'm probably gonna have to remove this at some point in the future, not for this video, and really try to improve this board a little bit. Possibly change out some of these caps, which I noticed some of them are pretty warm. That one's cool to the touch right now, especially with the lid off. Everything's pretty cool to the touch, but down by the voltage regulator, those caps that are down there, those are pretty warm. But it's possible that with some improvement, I could get rid of the wobble that's causing me to have those caps in there and not be able to use the phase control. And then that theoretically could fix this other problem with the other visual artifacts that I'm getting with the phase control turned all the way to one side. And, you know, with those caps out of there, then theoretically I could have a good looking image even with the cathode drive turned up. So the image is bright enough. Now back to the operation of the rest of the Lisa. I've been playing around with this, running some of the different OSs that are on the profile emulator, and it's pretty cool. And I gotta say that the Lisa itself is working perfectly, barring, of course, the CRT driver issues that I've been seeing. So I'm gonna turn on the machine and let's just poke around. I wanna show you a few examples of some of the stuff that's on the emulator. I have the RGB2HDMI capturing the composite video output from the back of the machine, but you know, the CRT is running, the computer is fully assembled right now, except the lid is off the top. And I went and grabbed another Macintosh Plus keyboard, one that has keys that actually work. This still has a few flaky keys. Seems that both my Mac Plus keyboards are no good. And here we are, we're booting into Lisa Office System 3.1. So earlier I was testing 2.0. That seems to have been what I copied onto the actual profile hard drive. I also used this floppy disk to boot into the version of LOS where I couldn't run any of the apps because of the serialization, and I copied those files over to this version. And this version, all the programs do work because the serialization has been patched out. So let's try cat. This is the picture I think Alex made that I've been trying to see since I've had the Lisa, and I've never been able to actually look at. Here we go. Okay, well, is that a bit of a letdown? Maybe. I don't know. I was curious if you could just draw with this. Oh, you can. Okay, because I think I saw something. Oh, it's so slow. So if you want to draw, then you can. Then you can. That must have been the way that the cat was drawn there. How do you make the lines thicker? Lines. There we go. Oops. Let's try that again here. Okay, I see. So it draws thin line, and my mouse skills are bad. Just writing out hello here. Did I reach the end of what? Yeah, I guess you could only draw so much. So I thought I picked thick. Okay, I see. You could do it after the fact. Anyhow, this is an object-oriented paint program, so you can move different parts like that around. So I guess we can change the texture of the line. Oh, we can fill the line. Okay. So we could give this cat a texture. Why don't we give it like one of these textures, like shingles? Oh boy, as I said, I think before, these textures look like they came, or Mac Paint really borrowed a lot of these textures, didn't they? There's our cat. Okay, good. I finally got to see the cat. So remember, there's no way for me to close without saving. The only way I can do that is revert to previous version, hit OK, and that'll undo everything I did to it so that we don't deface the drawing. And then if we're going to close this, we actually do have to save and put away, because setting aside is just minimizing versus putting away, which is actually closing. Okay, a couple more pictures. Macintosh. Okay. What is this? Do I have to blur that out? Let's just say that it's a French baguette and a couple grapefruits. So that was Macintosh. Let's try ugly Macintosh. Now, I don't want to be critical of someone's art skills. Oh, it's the same one. Okay. Because I certainly couldn't do better. So we have to save it, put it away, even though we didn't change it. I think this is my drawing, Lisa Draw Papers 1-1. Yep, that was something that I did, Adrian's Digital Basement. Now, also on here, I think it's down here, Lisa Mandelbrot port. This program was actually on one of the other partitions, or, images, and I copied it onto a floppy disk. And a lot like the Macintosh, you could just copy that right onto a disk and then, move it to here. Now, incidentally, I think I showed this before. If you drag something from the desktop or folder onto the disk, it moves it. It doesn't copy it, even though we're going from one disk to another. What you have to do is you have to select the icon. Oh, I'll demonstrate what it does, but the way you move, okay, here we go. I actually haven't played around with this. It does work though. Just looking at the CRT, which is working still, by the way, we're using both. So this is a Mandelbrot program. Is it? Oh, the Lisa is having technical difficulties. Okay, so this is what a Lisa crash looks like, I guess. I thought I ran this earlier, this particular program, but I guess it didn't crash. So I'm not sure what's going on here. Oh, it did reboot itself. I was about to power it off, but I have to say though that this thing has been totally stable. I mean, that's the first any kind of technical difficulty that I've had with the OSs on everything I've been playing around with this thing. It's rock solid and working perfectly, which is great because, I really wasn't sure that this Lisa was going to work properly with all the work I had done to it, and it's just been so modified and worked on. Here's what I wanted to demonstrate on making a duplicate of something. Like, so if I was going to copy to the floppy disk, it would work the same way. So we take the cat picture, we say duplicate, and it creates this flashing icon. And you can do this if you select multiple files as well. This is the copy. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't realize just moving it a little bit would make the copy itself. They both have the same name. Well, that's confusing. Let's ditch that one. The idea would be that you would select something like, we'll do it, I don't know, we'll copy all of those and we go duplicate, and this is that flashing thing. So they all flash, and then now we can drag these into, say, this folder or examples, and it's actually going to make a copy. And it's pretty slow at doing it, but obviously the disk I/O speed with the profile emulator, or maybe the profile as well, is quite slow. But this is how you would make a copy of a file and put it on a disk as well, because if you just drag it onto the floppy disk, it just moves it. So while these paradigms are a little bit different than what we're used to, it's not that hard to get your head around them. And to be honest, now that I've done it once, it's pretty easy and pretty obvious. So I think all of the tools that come with the Lisa are pretty easy to understand from a modern day perspective. Spreadsheet, we have the object-oriented drawing program, we have a graphing program, we have a list-making program, and this is to help you plan projects, and then we have a terminal. So this will be for using a modem, and then of course a word processor. And these were the applications that came built into the Lisa, and I think there really weren't too many more applications for the Lisa. And of course there's the on-screen calculator and the on-screen clock, which we've already looked at. Oh, and I guess these are the actual applications. Those other things were just the stationary pads to start a new document. So these are the actual apps. Looks like in this newer version of LOS, you actually have like a get info thing. It's this attribute option. Let's see what this does. I don't think I looked at this. Maybe it'll tell us how large this is. Oh yeah, it is like a get info. Oh, and you can password protect stuff as well. So 99 blocks for this particular application. And I think blocks are 512 bytes each. So this is like a 55 kilobyte application. Now I noticed in LOS 3.1, there were some additional options. So this is the normal convenience stuff. And I don't think, oh yeah, the screen brightness control is working again. That was weird after rebooting. Looks like we have a few additional options under here that we didn't have on the other one. So it actually shows image writer for the printer. And then we have connect devices. So this allows you to, I suppose, configure things. Daisy wheel printer, image writer, or DMP. Don't know what that is. A modem, serial cable, nothing. And then we have the expansion slots on the Lisa. 2-port card. I think this is to do with parallel ports. So you can hook up additional profile hard drives. Preamp card. My assumption, a preamp card might be for hard drive interfaces because I had a preamp 8-inch hard drive. So maybe if you wanted a large capacity hard drive, you would use this preamp card option. We also have install device software. Don't exactly know what that does. And then we have remove device software. Serial cable currently used, profile, console, modem A, 2-port, preamp disk, preamp card, parallel card, archive tape. So anyways, I guess there's some concept of device drivers that didn't seem to be in the older version. Oh, we also have a desk accessory menu. I don't know if I even noticed this before. Was that always there? But we have a clipboard option. Does this have like multiple clipboard items? No, it probably just shows you whatever just happens to be in the clipboard. Let's see if I can copy the name of that folder. Yes, Lisa Draw Examples. There we go. It's in the clipboard. Can you edit the clipboard? You cannot edit what is in the clipboard. Okay. Now, one thing I'm not used to is there's no restart option on the Lisa. All you can do is just push the button on the front of the machine to actually turn it off, which I'm going to do right now. There's a physical reset button on the back of the machine I can push, but that's just like a hard reset, you know, not a graceful shutdown, which I guess is what this thing really wants to happen. My assumption is I'm going to get that nice fade off on the CRT, which you will not see on the capture. Yep, nice slow fade off, but nothing happened over here. In fact, yeah, the screen is totally dark there, but that was still visible. Okay, so I power cycled everything, including the ESProfile emulator. So when I turn the machine back on, now we're going to be able to get that boot menu and we can just try some other stuff. I just want to quickly demonstrate it. I know this video is getting kind of long, but it's pretty cool to see some of this stuff because I've only ever seen LOS running on a video. I've never seen any of this other stuff. Okay, so a few things that we have that we can actually use. MacWorks Plus is actually how you would run Macintosh software on the Lisa. It's totally possible. And then we have MacWorks XL, which is a version of Macintosh OS that I think needs a custom ROM from the Sun Remarketing Company. I think that's the name of that company. They're the ones who bought all the leases from Apple and were selling them running Macintosh OS and sort of brought life to the Lisa until Apple took them all and crushed them all, or however that story goes. If you want to know more about that, you can watch the documentary on that. UniPlus is a Unix variant along with Xenix. Xenix is the Microsoft one and UniPlus is a different one. Workshop, I am pretty sure is like a development environment for the Lisa. So it's running on LOS 3.1, but the Workshop 3 is like UCSD Pascal or something like that and allows you to develop. Not sure what Blue is, and then this is just Lisa Office System older versions. So let's load up MacWorks Plus so you can see what the Lisa looks like when it's running Macintosh OS. And there it is, squished and everything. And that's because, of course, the Macintosh has 512 pixels across, but the Lisa has 640, even though the number of scan lines is very similar. So everything looks a little squishy. And that's the burn-in that I was talking about that's on this machine. The Mac Paint is all on the left side because it's designed for the 512 pixels across Macintosh, and running on the Lisa, you got a bunch of gray space over on the right side. So this is working, and this is running, I think, system 6, 6.1, 6.02. There we go, 1 meg of RAM. And it looks like someone has copied some games and stuff onto this hard drive, along with a couple applications. So we have Excel 2.2, and we can run Excel here, Microsoft Excel. And this would be one of the reasons why someone would have potentially wanted to run the Macintosh OS on, okay, Alex is actually the one who installed this. This is why you would want to run Macintosh OS on your Lisa. Even though you have this screwy aspect ratio and it all looks a little squished, you have access to all of the Macintosh programs, and there were so many more than were ever ported to the Lisa. Microsoft Excel, which I'm pretty sure the first version of Excel actually was for the Macintosh, this version probably, and it's very capable, and it's probably much more capable as a spreadsheet than the Lisa Calc is. It certainly feels like it runs a lot faster too. Let's see. Let's do a little something. I'm assuming this works like normal Excel formulas. Yes, it does. Okay, so it's totally how you would expect. And now, of course, if we change something, it updates very quickly. And it feels so much faster than in Lisa Calc did. But of course, we're not multitasking anymore. We're running in a single tasking version of Macintosh OS, although you could probably run Multifinder on here. Looks like we do have some controls. And I said earlier that I didn't think the Mac OS could actually control the screen brightness. Let's see if that's actually the case. So we have speaker volume. Okay, that works. Keyboard control, the regular mouse control that you have from the Mac. We have SCSI probe on here. That's funny. There's no actual SCSI controller on this machine, but there is one that the Sun Remarketing folks made that goes as an expansion slot, and then you can add SCSI devices. Bus not terminated. Yeah, well, there's no actual SCSI controller. Macintosh Plus is what it sees this computer as. Sound. So that's as expected. Seems we don't have working digital sound. Not sure if that's supposed to work. I'll have to ask Alex. Obviously, we have beeping that's working, but if digital sound is supposed to work, there might be a fault on this machine that I didn't fix. And then we have Sun Troll. This is the screensaver and the brightness. And yes, it's controlling the screen brightness. And this one is for the screensaver, and that works as well, and a delay. So why was it so burned in with Mac Paint? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe they were running a different version of MacWorks Plus or a different version of MacWorks that didn't have these controls available to them. Anyhow, this totally works as expected. It just feels like a slower Macintosh because the Lisa runs around 5 megahertz and the normal Mac Plus runs around 8. So it's definitely slower, and the aspect ratio looks funny, but it totally works, and it's filling up the entire screen, and yeah, it works as expected. Now, I fully expect if we try to run a game like Load Runner, it's going to run slowly and also, yeah, be sort of squished over to one side. And also we won't have any sound because we know the digital sound doesn't seem to work on this machine. And I don't know how to move around. Sure, there's a keyboard combo. Okay, I just figured out how to burn the ground in the nick of time. There we go. It's the U key, and I bet you it's the O key. And I don't know if there's any games written for the Lisa itself, so running it as a Macintosh app is certainly one way to have it work. I'm just checking the CRT, all looks good. I mean, other than the little visual artifacts from the lines and stuff like that. And we have no sound. Looks like Alex was playing Load Runner a little bit. Let's put my name on there. Now we hit restart. I did this before. It just restarts the Macintosh itself. And there's the Sun Remarketing logo and stuff that's added onto here. I'm pretty sure that Sun Remarketing made a bunch of accessories for the Lisa to improve its capabilities as a Macintosh, including an accelerator that affects the Mac OS. There's the aforementioned SCSI controller. I don't know if there's memory boards and other stuff like that, but shutdown actually dimmed the screen and turned off the computer. Cool. Yeah, I don't know what else they made for it, but I think they made quite a bit. So let's boot up and let's check out Unix. We'll try Xenix 3.0 10 megabyte image. That extra B was my fault. I think it was actually loading. It comes up with that boot prompt. You just hit enter. It does this PF00 Xenix, and then it loads up. There's no graphical user interface on this copy of Xenix. It's just regular old Xenix, 3.0 or whatever version it was, which is the same one that I think would run on 286s. So it sees us as a Lisa 2/10, and I guess that's based on the ROM version. It does have some swap space. And then we have to hit Control D, which I figured out is the command key. And the command key on this keyboard, this one here, wasn't working very well. And at first I was like, there's no control key. I don't even know what to do, how to get the system to boot. But we are booting now. Oh, it's bad conversion. Okay, I don't know how to type in the date. I guess you have to type it all in. There's our Lisa login. I'm pretty sure it's just root and there's no password. Now, the funny thing about the Lisa is you'd be thinking, hey, 68,000, this doesn't have a memory management unit. So how exactly would you, I don't even know if there's a term cap file. No, there doesn't seem to be a term cap file. How would it work with something like Unix? You need protected memory. Well, there is a memory management unit on the Lisa, actually. There's some additional RAM and some logic on the CPU board that facilitates protected memory or some extent of it, and that allows Unix to actually run on this. Now, I have no idea if you can have multiple users log into this at once over the serial ports, but I assume that it's totally possible. So you could actually have like 3 people running on here at the same time. It's pretty slow as you'd expect, but I've never used Xenix on a 286, and to be honest, it might be just as bad. Looks like we have multiplan on here. I'm not sure it's usable. Anything in the mount directory? Nope. The N key on this keyboard was not working properly, but I put some deoxit down it, and that seemed to kind of bring it back to life. So we have user directory. Let's see what's in here. There's the multiplan right there. Okay, it's trying to find some kind of interpreter or something. I assume, oops, I assume that's back here in the lib directory. So I guess this stuff needs to be copied into your various directories. Let's see, do we have that? Okay, yeah, we do have that. Okay. So let's see if I can copy that directory with recursive. No. Maybe I can move it. Directory rename only. Okay, I don't know how to move stuff, so I don't know how to use multiplan. I'm sure there's some method to do it, and people watching are probably much more familiar with these old versions of Unix and would be able to tell me what to do. There's this once directory. Maybe this is an installer. The N key has decided to leave the chat. Oh, it came back. Oh, installing it. Oh, enter the activation key. Okay, that didn't work. In user bin, we got the usual things like UUlog, UUnow, UUsend. That's like UCP related stuff. This does have email capability on it, so you would use UUCP to transfer messages between systems. It would use the serial port and cron jobs and stuff like that. So let's try sending an email to myself. I think Control D. CC, no one. Alias error. Letters saved in dead letters. I think I saw that here in the root directory, dead letter. Welcome to Xenix. And then there's my dead email as well. That was the first one went to guest, and the second one went to root. There's a bin directory as well, just in the root directory. It's got all the usual Unix commands in here, add, and stuff like that. Grep, head. Oh, we do have a copy of VI on here. That's cool. Unknown terminal type. Okay, well, that's not going to work. This keyboard also has no escape key. So I'm not sure how to use VI in that case. Okay, Control C. Okay, that exited out. I do have mail now. Yeah, it's weird. Lisa WB there's no term cap file, so things don't know how to use the terminal. Looks like we have the usual banner program. Hello world. Yeah, this totally works. So the Unix on here is pretty similar to what's on the Plexus P20 actually. That thing supports 8 users. It also is a little bit newer. It's faster. It's got a 6810, and I think the clock speed was faster. It actually has 2 processors. The other one's used for I/O. And that machine probably cost a lot less than the Lisa cost as well. This thing was extremely expensive. And if you're running Unix like this, you're not even taking advantage of the graphical user interface that's on here. So it's kind of an oddball thing to even want to run on this. But one of the biggest problems with the Lisa itself, with its original LOS, is while Apple put a lot of work into it, it was very forward thinking with the paradigm and the capabilities, and it was multitasking, there just weren't very many programs written for this. Now, Alex tells me that there were things that were written for it, but they're lost to time at this point. There isn't really like a Lisa software archival project, and so many people who had these upgraded to running Macintosh OS on these, and with the profile hard drive itself. In fact, that profile hard drive, when I imaged it, what was on there was just Mac OS and just some regular Mac programs. So there was nothing special about what was on that profile hard drive, which could add some long-lost Lisa program, but it wasn't the case. So that means if you have any profile hard drives that are sitting around that haven't been erased at this point, it's really important for you to try to archive them if they still work using the profile emulator and get that image off of it and send that over to Alex, because Alex will be able to analyze that and figure out if there's any software that's on there that hasn't been preserved. Now, funny thing is, someone shared with me a video from BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and in the early 80s, they were using Apple Lisas as part of their weather forecasting system for on-air use. These were seemingly controlling a Quantel paint box to do the graphics and stuff, but they would use the Lisa with some custom software in LOS to actually design the layout of the weather map and put like the icons and stuff around it. And that program, unfortunately, is totally lost to time. But it seems like they had a number of Lisas in the production studio being used for that purpose. And it would be so cool if someone were able to uncover that software so we could preserve that and then people could play with it. Obviously, we don't have a Quantel paint box to control using the Lisa, but there's got to be other Lisa software that existed out there that people had written custom, and it's just been lost to time. And with that, we are at the end of this Lisa reconstruction. I think when I started this project, I never would have thought I would have had a working Apple Lisa. It just felt like the problems that this machine had were insurmountable. But as evidenced by what you see here on the bench, this machine is working wonderfully at this point. Clearly, there's still a little bit of work to be done with the CRT driver board, and maybe I can find a replacement CRT. If you have any good leads on those, please let me know. I think the Atari monochrome, the Atari ST monochrome monitor is a suitable donor for this machine. And I think I do have one of those monochrome Atari monitors, but unfortunately the CRT on it is also very worn out and burned in. So I don't think it would really be better than this one. I really, really want to thank everyone who has made it possible for me to get to this point with this machine. It's definitely been a community effort, and without people's help like Alex and Jared, who sent in parts, and of course AJ, who gave me the machine in the first place, I never would have been here at this point with a working Lisa. I still can't even really believe it. I just can't believe it that this machine is working. Just amazing. Anyhow, if you've enjoyed this whole long series, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you haven't seen the previous parts, there'll be a link down below to a playlist and a couple second channel videos as well, where I kind of go through all the motions of trying to get this machine working. And I hope this series has provided the community with some information on what it takes to get one of these machines up and running, especially one that has severe damage like this one has. If you're thinking of buying a Lisa and it's not a 2/10, if it's a 2.5, oh look at that, it dimmed the screen. If it's a 2/5 or one of the original Lisa ones, be prepared for potential carnage inside the machine, and there'll be a lot of work ahead of you to get the machine up and running, kind of like what I went through with this machine. And I don't really know what else to say other than I'm very grateful to finally have one of these machines, and it was certainly a labor of love getting to this point, but I'm very happy with the way this thing turned out. And maybe I'll bring this to the next VCF show up in Seattle. If anyone wants to see this thing in the flesh, let me know. I think the next thing I need to really start focusing on is getting back to the Plexus P20, which has been sitting here off camera now for months and months and months. It should still theoretically work from where I left it, but I need to make sure it does, because I have plans for this machine in the future and it's going to go to a good home. So I want to make sure it's all ready to go for that transfer. Anyhow, thumbs up if you liked this video, thumbs down if you didn't, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Huge thanks to my supporters whose names are going on the side of the screen to make it possible to do this full time. All the usual YouTube junk, and I guess that's going to be that. So stay healthy, stay safe, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.